Hey guys, it's me. Sorry I've been taking so long to make episodes. Also, sorry I'm hyperventilating. It's the only thing keeping me from throwing up right now. I've been battling the flu for 2 days. Actually, no, not 2 days, 2 weeks. Um, and I wanted to thank you all for being very patient. Also, I'm not using my normal camera because I can't find the charger. But I also wanted to ask what you think of the. I've tried recording my voice in a new location. I want to hear what you think of it. See how my voice sounds and compare, I guess. I think I'm getting better though, so hopefully more updates more frequently. Okay, thank you. Uh, let the show start.
Alright, it's time to discuss the heroes of Digimon Adventure. So many iconic characters, so little time. Who am I kidding? I've got all the time in the world, technically. But before we get started, I want to mention a complaint I have with this season when it comes to the characters. We're gonna get more into it later on, towards the end, but right now I just want to throw it out there saying that I think there are too many kids in this season. I mean, 7 heroes, that's kind of a lot of characters to keep track of, and when you consider the fact that Kari joins later on, making it 8 heroes, which means the show has to give 7 or 8 kids enough things to do, or enough emotional conflicts, or enough something to make it seem like they're not being neglected in the group and keep them relevant. And the show also has to introduce new villains, new settings, new concepts, new evolutions. Having to do all that can really slow an arc down or just bring it to a complete stop. The worst this ever got was during the first arc, because there we had to set up the digital world in the first episode. Then we had 6 episodes dedicated to setting up the kids and the important evolutions, minus TK. And then we also had to have one more episode dedicated to setting up the villain, who at that point had not been introduced. That's 8 episodes of setup in a 13 episode arc. Do you see what I mean? It takes over half the arc before it actually gets going. So to me, having more characters is really bad. Or I should say, it's hard to pull off without the story becoming repetitive, slow, or at times confusing. But to me, it seems a little obvious why they did this. To me, it seems like the writers looked at a list of all the different demographics they wanted to reach and wrote characters around each one. So that's why there's so many of them. They wanted to reach as many groups as possible. And the kids themselves are kind of, well, stereotypes. But they're not bad stereotypes. I mean, most of the kids are generally likable, and they actually have interesting character traits that you wouldn't expect from a show like this. I just wish they would trim the number of kids down a little bit so that the story can focus in on them a little more. Once again, I'm going to talk more about this as we go along, but just keep what I've said in mind for, like, future references and stuff. I guess we should start talking about the kids. Let's start with the leader, I guess. It'd be kind of dumb if we didn't. Also, I won't be spending too much time on the individual Digimon. I won't be giving them their own part or anything, mainly because I don't feel like there's enough variation in their personalities to warrant that. So I'll just make brief mentions of them and their evolutions, and also pretty much make a blanket statement saying that they are all generally nice, helpful, funny, caring, and likable, I guess. Tai is our main kid for this season, and he's kind of our jock stereotype. He's competitive, he's strong-headed, he's very athletic. He's also pretty nice, but sometimes things don't come out the way he wants them to come out. This is honestly going to be a lot harder to talk about when compared to Taiki, because there's nothing about Tai that I overabundantly hate or love. The group structure in this season is definitely better than it was in Cross Wars. All the characters in the group start off with Digimon, putting them on an equal playing field. Tai is not an unquestionable leader. In fact, some of the most memorable group interactions that this season has are people questioning Tai's leadership. Like I said before, he's not dumb, but he's not particularly a genius either. He makes some pretty dumb mistakes, and some bullheaded comments that end up damaging the group. But for some of his bigger mistakes, you see him actually going through a learning process to show that he's developing as a leader and as a character. The most notable example is, of course, the Skull Greymon episode. This does two things. One, introduces the very interesting concept of negative evolutions, and two, gives us a bit of insight into Tai's backstory through exposition that Sora gives. We learned that before coming to the digital world, Tai would act very selfish during group activities, mainly soccer. So we get to see that Tai is actually kind of a jerk, and doesn't do well in group activities, and may actually not be such a good leader. He ends up taking everyone's food and gives it to Agumon, which is a big problem later when everyone gets attacked and all their Digimon are too hungry to fight. So in desperation, Tai tries to get Greymon to Digivolve, but uh-oh, he did it the wrong way, and Greymon's become a horrible Skull Greymon monster that's destroying everything, and everyone almost dies. Then Tai has this moment of self-reflection where he realizes he effed up really bad. He starts to question his own leadership. He also becomes fearful of the idea that Agumon, if he digivolves, could turn into Skull Greymon again. This episode is followed up by an episode where Mimi has to save the day from a cruise ship owning Medusa chicken. We will pretend this episode did not happen and move on to the next one, where Tai's fears and concerns are directly addressed. Tai and the others meet a Digimon named Piximon, who agrees to help train the kids to fight Edamon. For Tai's training, Piximon throws him in this cave where he has to relive a childhood trauma and overcome it. Tai's emotional trauma as a kid was learning how to ride a bike. Through reliving this experience, Tai learns a very important lesson. You're gonna fall down eventually, but you gotta get right back up and try again. In this case, your revenge... Tai, we know you turned your best friend into a mindless killing machine that almost ended up murdering everyone, but don't give up and try again, because eventually you won't create a hideous monster. I kid, but I actually like this moral and these last couple episodes that deal with Tai. They introduce a really interesting idea with the whole negative evolutions in Skull Greymon. Granted, they don't do a lot with it after these couple episodes. I mean, Agumon never turns into Skull Greymon again, and I don't think Skull Greymon is even brought up in any, meaningful way. I mean, I would expect it to be brought up again, if Matt and Tai were fighting, and it was really heated, and Matt just blurts it out, kinda without thinking, and... I just kind of find it hard to believe that Matt never brought it up again as some type of ace in the hole against Tai. I don't know, this whole thing seems to completely change how evolutions work for these kids. And I'm really surprised more wasn't done with it. I mean, what would a negative evolution look like for Sora or Izzy? And why is this fear of them only extend to Tai? I would think that as neurotic as Joe was, he would be freaking out that every bad action or decision he makes can somehow lead to these type of evolutions. I know, I feel like this whole phobia should have lasted maybe a little more than 2 to 3 episodes. That's just me. Although Tai does gain a new phobia very quickly. The fear of death. Yeah, you see, Izzy tells Tai that the digital world is, well, a digital world. And Tai takes this as death has no consequence. It's basically a video game. If he dies, then he will either respawn in the digital world or in the human world. This isn't real, is how he views it. Then Izzy tells him that's not how it works. If you die in the digital world, you die in real life. This causes Tai to have second thoughts about his previous death-defying actions. But in short, he gets over it. This again is a pretty good idea for character development, especially for Tai, seeing how he's kind of strong-headed, and it also does flesh out the digital world a little more. But I think that it comes a little too close after the Skull Greymon episodes. I mean, both these happen in the same arc. And this arc is only like 10 episodes long, or less than 10 episodes long. Let someone else have the spotlight, Tai. I mean, I know you're the leader and all, but this is still supposed to be a group. Everyone's supposed to be valued equally. The second arc seems to place this sort of heightened importance on Tai that wasn't there before and isn't seemed to be given to any other characters. It's fine to have this development, in fact I encourage it, but space it out more amongst other characters. I guess it's supposed to be like some form of build-up to when Tai leaves and goes back to the real world. And I really like this episode. I love the atmosphere. I like how they introduce Kari, but my big complaint is the fact that it's another Tai episode coming directly after a Tai development episode, which came directly after a couple episodes dedicated to Tai overcoming his fear of Digievolution. Space these out more. I mean, that thing with Tai learning to overcome his fear of death in the digital world, that could have been done during the first arc. In fact, I think it should have been done during the first arc because it's still trying to set up what the digital world is. Give the other characters a little something to do that doesn't involve Medusa chickens. But we do learn why Tai is so important. Apparently, the entire group cannot exist without Tai in it. Because when Tai leaves, everyone else splits off and goes on their own. I don't know why they all go on their own. Sora says she left because she went to look for Tai, and then everyone else left for different reasons. They don't say what they are. But I guess we can safely assume that when Tai left the group, he took their common sense with him. I guess this group had no reason to exist without Tai, except, surviving a dangerous new world that has tried to kill them over and over and over again. Once again, I get Tai's the leader, I understand this, but still, this idea that Tai was so important to the group that he was the only thing keeping them together, because without him, apparently everyone just goes off on their own, once again plays to the hyper-importance of Tai, and also makes everyone else look completely moronic and lost without him. You could separate these kids in a dozen different ways. Earthquake, tornado, teleportation, whatever. Do something else. I can't stress this enough, I love learning about these kids. I love seeing them conquer their fears. I love seeing them develop. It's those type of things that has the characters create connections with the audience and has us actually care what happens to them. But still, you've got to spread out the development a little bit, especially when it's among 7 other people. Or else it looks like Tai's the only character that matters and everyone else is of no consequence. And from this point on, it seems like most of Tai's character development, if not all of his character development, comes from his interactions and relationship with his sister Kari. But even then, a lot of that isn't necessarily character development. It's Tai explaining who Kari is so the audience knows. Here's what I'm talking about. Listen to Tai tell Izzy about the time he almost killed Kari by taking her outside when she was really sick.
That's her. That's Kari. She never thinks about herself. It doesn't matter if she feels bad or she's bummed out about other stuff. She's always worried about the other kids. She wouldn't be sick, she'd be just fine if she never came to this stupid place. But she came because she knew that we needed her help. She never thought about what she wanted. She never does.
Because she cares.
She's a kid. I'm her big brother. I'm supposed to look after her and protect her and think of what's best for her.
See what I mean? Doesn't it seem like the writers are trying to give us a real quick character outline of Kari, but disguise it as character development for Tai? And nothing really comes of this story, I don't think. I mean, we learn that Tai loves his sister and will do anything to protect her. And also that he actually feels a little guilty about bringing her into the digital world, although I don't think he ever expresses this guilt again. In fact, I don't remember any hints that he was even guilty. In fact, before this episode, there wasn't much evidence to show that Tai was guilty about bringing Kari into the digital world. If he was showing signs of guilt, it must have been really subtle because I didn't see it. I didn't see like a lot of solemn stares at Kari, him acting paranoid around her, him being controlling or commanding, or acting out of character. He just seemed like he was before, just he had Kari around. But for all my complaining, I still like Tai. He seems like a nice, likable kid, but at the same time he's not perfect. He's a very flawed character, which is good. It makes him more interesting to watch, adds more humanizing qualities to him, which allows the audience to connect to him more easily. No, my problem with Tai is the fact that the show puts him on this elevated status that is so much higher than everyone else. And I know, once again, he's the leader. He's supposed to have this elevated status, but it's so elevated above everyone else that all the other kids in the group come off to me as kind of more of a supporting cast than, like, a team. I mean, the show pretty much says without Tai, the whole group would fall apart. And we see later when other kids decide to go off on their own, the group seems to, do pretty well. I mean, they take down a Dark Master, that's, pretty good. And Tai also gets, I think, the most unique relationship to the members of the group. Matt's his rival, Kari's his younger sister. He acts as like a surrogate big brother for TK, or de facto big brother. Izzy is kind of his confidant. And Sora is his love interest? And to elevate his status and importance even more, he's one of only 2 kids to get Mega Level evolutions, which are the only evolutions that can even stand up to the Dark Masters, limiting the uses of all the other kids in the group, and making him even more invaluable. I personally think a lot of these problems come from the fact that the group is so big. Typically, the larger the group of people, the more important it becomes for that group to have a definite leader. And that's pretty much what Tai is. Sure, he gets his leadership questioned several times and he makes bad decisions, but the show never takes the focus off of him. I mean, he's always the leader of the group. And when he's not the leader, well, there is no group. But I kind of understand why, because in a group of 7 to 8 kids, and if everyone had equal say in the group and had varying different opinions, then a lot of stuff wouldn't get done. They would all just stand around bickering constantly. So, you guys can stay in the background, and we'll let Tai, and to a somewhat lesser extent Matt, make most of the decisions here. We'll call you whenever we need you to outnumber something for us. Guess I should bring up growth and development, because I guess there was some. I mean, Tai seems a lot less selfish at the end of the story than he did from the beginning. Although, towards the end, he still has his moments of bullheadedness.
I have had enough! Every time we fight, we wind up losing another friend!
This is war, Mimi, and sometimes people we like get hurt, so deal with it!
Stop it, Tai!
Ha! Suck it, Mimi. I'm having a hard time talking about Tai for some reason. Like I said before, I don't hate Tai like I hated Taiki, and I don't really consider him a great character. I think there's better characters even in this season. But what I didn't talk about was his personality, which I think is very likable. I mean, he seems like a pretty cool kid. He's got probably some of the coolest evolutions in this season. Well, second coolest. I already did a video on Metal Greymon, and War Greymon is just classic badass. But I think I'm just gonna call it quits early. I honestly don't have much else to talk about, and I've been fighting off a stomach flu. We're going to talk about Matt next, and that's actually when I think I'm going to talk about Tai and Matt's relationship. Because it is probably the most memorable relationship and some of those memorable interactions in the season. But I guess I should give final thoughts. Final thoughts. Tai's okay. He's not my favorite protagonist, but he's not annoying and loud, and he's also not boring, and he's not annoyingly perfect. So he ranks pretty high up there in terms of lead protagonists. I think I'm gonna throw up.